Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you here. This session is being hosted by OFMA, the Oregon Farmers Markets Association. We support farmers markets across the state with training, advocacy, and promotion. And we have lots of online events, including workshops and webinars and peer circles for market staff across the state to have time to talk shop with each other. So today, this session is part of our Market Showcase series. Each episode of this features a market talking about a challenge they had and what they did to get help to solve it. The way these work is that that market goes first telling their story, and then the space is open for Q&A or for any other market to share knowledge that you have from your own market's experience on today's topic. And we really hope that this can be a space to talk candidly with your peers about how to innovate our markets. So a couple things about how our sessions work and sharing discussion time with each other, because we hope you'll be comfortable here in this online world. My name is Amanda Cross. I'm with OFMA, and I'm here as host today. Feel free to be off camera if that helps you attend and participate. And this is definitely a participatory space. We want you to ask questions and share what you know. You can talk out loud or put comments and questions and affirmations in the chat. But also please share the time with others so we can hear from a variety of markets. In fact, if you tend to find yourself in the place of talking for a while, maybe try asking another person to share and just open up the space to others instead. So today we have Alexis Molinari here. She is the market manager for the Lane County Farmers Market. Her market worked with Synergy Resources Group to help their board improve their processes and work together better. So Alexis, would you like to introduce yourself and share what your market learned?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I am Alexis. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the market director for LCFM. And yeah, like Amanda said, we, as part of our market advancement project through the Farmers Market Learning Network, we ended up choosing to focus on organizational structure. It was something that our board hadn't really ever sat down and focused on intentionally, and it felt like we were at a time in our organization of a lot of growth, and without having like a good organizational foundation, we weren't going to be able to sustain all the new things that we wanted to do. So we took this opportunity to choose to focus on organizational structure and just gaining more clarity around board and staff roles. And we were partnered with Synergy Resource Group, which is a firm that specializes in organizational development. And they've been great. Our board was really excited to work with a consultant because, as many of you probably experience, it's really hard to it's really easy to get stuck on a topic during board meetings and having that like third party outside perspective really helps to like push things through. So we were really excited to work with a consultant, and we actually ended up, or the board actually ended up approving additional funding in addition to what OFMA was funding already, just so we could have a more thorough audit of our organization and include some interviews with both staff members and board members. So yeah, the phase one process focused on reviewing LCFM's organizational structure, job descriptions, board communications, and I'll share with you guys a presentation that has like a timeline and a scope of work so you can see what happened each month. It's been a really long process. The first phase of the project did have to wrap up after 3 months, just so we could meet the timeline that OFMA had for this project. But then we continued after that, even until now. It's not fully done. But Synergy facilitated board workshops, interviews, and what came out of the first phase was some really helpful checklists, both for organizational assessment checklist, and hopefully you guys can use that for your own markets. We had some board matrix templates that came out of that, policy documents, and they did a really nice job of like wrapping everything up and really showcasing like, this is what we identified as things you can work on. These are things that you're doing really well. And then from there, we were able to move on to our strategic planning, which is what we're doing right now. Amanda and I have compiled some documents in a Google folder that OFMA will share, but I'll share some on my screen now. And feel free to ask questions on them. They're very wordy, and on the screen at first they might seem confusing, but I'm happy to answer questions about it. I also added our board notebook checklist on this folder, and that's something that was recommended by Synergy, and over time I've just put it together, and pretty much is just a digital board handbook where any board member could access at any time, and it has important materials regarding their roles, staff roles, operational information on what the organization does, and just like about anything that a board member might want, like budgets, stuff like that. So I'll share that with you. I'll pause here. Or are we doing questions just at the end?
No, I think we're a pretty small group, so if people want to ask questions along the way, I think that's okay. Maybe put them in the chat or raise a hand, and then we can call on you. Yeah. If that works for Alexis, it's kind of up to you.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'd rather answer questions as I'm going along. Like if they're relevant to whatever I just said, I'll answer them now, and if not, other questions will come up later. That's great too. Darcy.
About kind of how was it this project at the instigation of your board or staff or together? Like, how did you decide that this was the project that you wanted to focus on?
It was definitely led by staff, and at first the board was a little hesitant to go into it because it was a lot of work. And we really pushed for it. We actually blamed OFMA, and we said, we have to do this. OFMA is telling us we have to do it, and it's part of our agreement with it, which it was, it was part of our agreement. So we put it on OFMA, and we told them we had to do it. But the area of focus was chosen by the staff. Yeah. I'll go ahead and share some of those documents on my screen with you. I'll start with the notebook, just so you can see a checklist. And this is everything that can be found on that Google. It's a Google Drive, so we use Google Drive for most of all of our communication with the board, and just that's where we compile everything that we do. So we have the operational budget, both the current one and past ones, so they can compare. We've got each committee has its own folder, and in each folder you can find the agenda and minutes and notes for past committee meetings. The bylaws of our organization can be found there. Job descriptions for staff, so board members can see what each staff member is responsible for. There's a folder for board member meetings that include, again, agenda, minutes, notes. There's an annual report, and that's that report is what we put out to our membership every year. But it is really helpful for the board members, new incoming board members, to look at it and see like what happened last year. But it is something that is intended for our membership. Our strategic plan is there. All strategic plans can also be found there. The employee handbook, the vendor handbook, which are two different handbooks, and then things like contact info for all the current board members, contact info for all the current staff, board recruitment information. So we've got a board recruitment flyer, a board recruitment like Google form where people who are interested would fill out. And I actually copied that from OFMA. It's pretty similar to the one that OFMA has. And then our board member orientation, which that was a new thing that we created. And it's a pretty like simple presentation called LCFM 101, but it just goes over what does LCFM do, who are our partner organizations, stakeholders, what programming do we do, what happens when, stuff like that. So that's what we called our board notebook. I'm going to stop sharing this and move on to the next one. The next thing that I want to share, and you have the link has all of these documents, but the next one I'm going to share is the board matrix. This is just the template, so it's not accurate to LCFM, but it's pretty comprehensive. You would have each board member on the top, and then you would go through and mark, what skills does each person have, contacts, demographics, when did they join, information for each person, and then responsibilities, like what committees are they in, what is their, do they have a board position, what is it, and stuff like that. Some of our board members are members of the organization, and some of them are community members. So in a lot of the things that we do, like if we were going to submit big changes, some of them aren't voting members. They are just community board members. So just to identify who is what. So this is the board matrix. I'm going to stop sharing this one and move on to sharing the organizational assessment. This is the very lengthy one. I don't think we can go through each category. And this is the assessment that Synergy gave LCFM after our phase 1. So if you go through this, you will see all of our secrets. But it was really helpful. And not only like learning what they're recommending and what we could improve, but also learning what we are doing right, which I think is really important, because it's such a unique job that we have that you're just kind of winging it all the time. So it's nice to know, like, yeah, what are you doing right? What do you have? And it goes on. It has comments.
It might be a little, at least on my screen, it might be a little hard for people to read. Maybe you could pick off a couple to read off a few things just so people can hear what sorts of things are on there. Oh yeah, or
yeah.
increase.
Is it easier to read now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first, it's board governance. So this focuses a lot on board responsibility, what kind of policies do they have in place, how familiar are they with the organization's programs, and then if you scroll, it says, do we have it? Yes, no, what they recommended, and then additional notes. And then if we scroll down, it goes into more of the staffing functions. And it is a lot of like policy documents that they recommended that we have in place that we didn't have in place before. We worked a lot on job descriptions. They were very outdated when we first started working with them. And we reviewed them and updated them to reflect the current job that we were actually doing. we talked a lot about staff evaluations, and we were doing staff evaluations prior to them, but we didn't really have a consistent system that the board knew about. It was very like when we can get to it. So we really like dialed that in and created a pretty consistent one, and that we can use, moving forward. Even if I leave or Megan leaves, we could, pass that on. A lot of the work that we did was in the context of succession planning as well. But yeah, I mean, it goes on. I'm happy to answer specific questions if you see anything that jumps at you. I don't know how to pick one.
Alexis, I can tell you, you already have one fan. Nikita says this is fulfilling their OCD Virgo life.
That's great. Yeah, we did not create this. Synergy created this. So I was very happy to get this. So we started March of 2023, and that was part of the agreement that we had with OFMA. And then from March through April, we wrapped up the first phase. And then from April 2023 all the way to now, and we'll be hopefully done in September of this year, we've been working on the strategic planning. The first phase focused on Synergy, assessing LCFM's operations, policies, procedures. What did we already have in place? They provided a lot of policy templates that LCFM could use, which are also in that Google folder that Amanda has shared. We conduct, because LCFM decided to, fund additional or put additional funding towards this phase, we were able to conduct one-on-one interviews with all of our board members, all of our staff members, and they were able to provide us with a summary of the interviews in like a report form of what they found out. And then the last part of this phase was hosting an in-person board workshop where Synergy presented all the recommendations, which is that checklist that I was just showing you, and then best practices, and they really just like wrapped everything really nicely and presented it. And then from there is where we moved into digging deeper and starting our strategic planning. We did stakeholder engagement. So we did customer surveys and interviews with customers. They also interviewed a handful of our vendors. And at the bottom, you can see a lot of these topics included like, how can we improve the market experience? What opportunities do folks see for the market? Where do they want the market to go? Where do they see this organization moving towards? And then we hosted focus groups. So instead of doing just one-on-one interviews, we got little groups together, and they all, were able to talk between each other and just gain different perspectives from each other. And Synergy was really able to collect a lot of data from those focus groups. And as you can see, that was from June to November, because scheduling people takes a really long time. So that took a big chunk of our timeline. At the same time they were doing that, we were focusing on the SWOT workshops, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And Synergy evaluated LCFM's market operations, admin operations, and board governance. And we kind of went through each one of those areas and identified strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for each area. And then Synergy was able to put everything into an analysis report. And that's what we've been using now to develop our actual strategic plan and goals and values. Something that we didn't have before was a set of like outlined values for the organization. And we have developed that now, which has been really helpful. We've been using the values at the beginning of each board meeting, and just to really get everybody on the same page and remind board members of what our guiding light is when we're making decisions. We got tons of reports that we can use and evaluate. And then, yeah, here we moved into mission, purpose, vision, values. And we did a combination of like in-person workshops and virtual workshops, just depending on people's availabilities. I will say that the in-person workshops were a lot more effective than the virtual workshops. So if you were going to get into this type of project, I do suggest having some in-person stuff. They're making sure that you get your board to commit to some in-person stuff. We went through, we created value statements. And right now we are on the goal setting phase. And hopefully we'll walk out of here with a full strategic plan that we can use moving into the next like 3, 5, 10 years. This is not to say that we won't review the strategic plan for another 3, 5, 10 years. We'll probably review it every year, but at least there's just a working document. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There's a working document that we can use and keep updating, but at least it's just like a very strong foundation of where we're at. So that's the presentation on what we did with Synergy and what we got out of it. I'm happy to answer questions and have like an open discussion, but that is all I have prepared to present.
Lisa's asking, how did you choose the folks for your in-person focus groups?
So for customers, we chose the people who we already had a rapport with that come to the market, the regulars that come to the market all the time, that we kind of knew are pretty invested in the market and might, make time out of their day to sit down with a consultant to talk about the market. So we kind of handpicked those. We didn't put out a public announcement just because it was kind of, we had to get it done. And then for vendors, I did put out an email to the full membership to see who was interested in participating. And from there, people contacted Synergy. And it was really great working with a consultant because they did a lot of the scheduling and the communications. So I really just had to give them like contact info. And then from there, they took it from there, which was a huge help. And they're really good at what they do. And vendors tend to, if it was me trying to schedule it, I feel like it wouldn't have worked as smoothly as if it was like a consultant that seems a lot more legit, where they feel like there's more accountability there. So that was really nice. I will say that we had half of our board changed halfway through this process. So when we did our board interviews, we conducted a one-on-one interview with each board member. Half of those board members are no longer board members in the organization. So a lot of that analysis, or like initial analysis, was stuff that came from past board members, but it was still really helpful, and it's still we've still been able to use it, and it's relevant. But it has been interesting having that like board transition in the middle of this project.
How is the farmers market structured?
As far as the staffing or the board?
As just like, is it an LLC? Is it a nonprofit? Is it under like the city?
Yeah. So we're a C corporation, and we're not recognized as a nonprofit federally. We are recognized as a nonprofit statewide. So we are not exempt.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I think it's like a company for the mutual benefit of the membership. Yeah.
I ask because I'm just in the process right now of trying to figure out how to structure the farmers market, and I'm working with the city, so it's really unique trying to figure out how, like, the best way to do it.
Yeah, I don't know the best way to do it. And there's a lot of our part of our strategic planning has been trying to decide if we want to try to become a nonprofit, because there's a lot of perks that we are missing out on. But then that would mean we have to change a lot of our operational model and how we do things and change a lot of our bylaws. Whoever wrote our bylaws was very smart and set them up so they could be slightly changed to fit a nonprofit, but operationally wise, like the way we've been doing things, it's not nonprofit. Like it would not comply with nonprofit requirements. Yeah. So I think there's like advantages and disadvantages to both, depending on what your market is wanting to focus on, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like it's like a very complex thing to try to like figure out exactly how it works best in the long run, and trying to decipher that has just really been kind of a tedious process.
Yeah. Yes.
Um,
So I appreciate all input and opinions.
Nikita, we do have a workshop coming up in September with a tax lawyer type person who is helping to advise on especially those farmers markets that are set up with the state as a nonprofit or mutual benefit, but haven't yet gotten their like any federal designation of like, well, how do they file? I get this question a lot. How do we file taxes? What are we supposed to do? And I'm like, I don't know. So I finally found someone to come in and help answer that question, but also talk about like different organizational structures for farmers markets. So that's coming up in September if you're able
That
to
is,
wait.
thank you.
Lisa, we conducted a non-customer survey. We didn't get great results on it. Not a lot of folks participated, but it was a very short survey, and we went to grocery stores and try to target people who we know buy groceries but don't buy them from the farmers market. And we didn't get that much information from it. It was not what we thought it would be, but that's something that I would love to find out. It's just like how to target folks who don't come to the market and ask them why they don't come to the market, or if they would come to the market, find out how we can reach them, via marketing or promotional stuff. But we tried. We tried. Yeah. To me, what was most helpful from this whole project was creating a better culture between board and staff. Not that we didn't have a positive culture before, but it was very messy and very unclear. And we're in a much better place now where people understand what their role is and are excited. I think that before people there was nothing to feel excited about because we didn't have a lot of direction. A lot of our organizational focus had been build a building, move into the building, get through COVID. And we did that. I mean, COVID's not over, but like we built the building, we moved into the building, we got through like the peak pandemic. And then after that, everyone was just like, okay, what do we do? And board wasn't giving a lot of direction to staff. So staff, like me and my colleague Megan, we just made things up. We're like, this sounds great. Let's apply to this grant. Let's create this program. And the board was like, great, love it. Keep doing what you're doing. But it got to a point where we really needed the board to govern the organization. and it was messy. So right now we're at a much better place. People know what they're supposed to be doing. We have a direction, and people are feeling really excited about it and are not feeling confused. I'm reading Lisa's question. Will that culture continue through policies? Yeah, both. I think both. I think setting policies and setting like an organizational foundation, like what I showed you, is very important. Just in case there's not that institutional knowledge being passed on, at least there's like systemic knowledge. Like it's there, and that can get passed on to whoever. It's funny because I think like membership culture and board culture are two very different things. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the culture between membership and staff had been changing a lot when I first took over, and I think COVID had a lot to do with that. And I'm sure if you guys had a similar experience, if not at work, just like in your home, where community bonded a lot and there was a lot of like collaboration happening at that time. So that felt really strong, and it felt like we were moving away from a seniority based like membership where like the older, more experienced vendors get all the good stuff and the new vendors feel really alienated and confused. And that had been changing a lot. So I really wanted to reflect that in our board. But for that, we needed a facilitator.
I'm curious, Alexis, if your board has committees and if like committee participation came up at all in this process, what committees exist, who's leading them, how that work is getting.
Yeah. So we currently have, I think, 6 committees. We've got the financial committee, the standards committee, marketing committee, vendor handbook committee, grant committee, and site committee, which originally the site committee was very focused on the new site, the new building, and now just moved into being like, how do we improve the site for customer and vendor experience? Each board member is required to join 1 committee. They cannot join more than 3 committees. And the committees are pretty led by staff. And joining the OFMA board, I've been very surprised that the committees are very led by board members, it seems. And that's something that I would love to pivot for LCFM, to have the board members try to be leading the committees more and not falling back on staff to be chairs, create agendas, create content for the meetings, execute actionable items. That's how we operate right now. And it's been changing a little bit through this process. They're still very involved. It's just not very like they're not. They come to the meeting and they give their opinion and their direction, and then staff kind of takes it from there. As well as the chair responsibilities of gathering the notes and the agenda and sending out Zoom links and stuff like that. That's also falls on staff. Each committee is pretty different. Their committees are a lot more active than others. The financial and marketing committee meets every month. And the standards committee meets as needed. That's the committee that looks at what our vendor eligibility requirements are. If there are vendors applying that I don't feel comfortable approving right away because they have questionable products or they don't necessarily meet our requirements, but I really want them to join the market, I would bring that to the standards committee. So that one meets as needed. The vendor handbook committee meets at the end of a year to review the handbook and update it if it needs to be updated. The marketing committee meets every month, and the site committee depending on what's going on, we'll just meet as needed as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I know it's always a hard thing, and kind of ebbs and flows with the size of your board too. Like when boards tend to be smaller, it's hard to keep up that committee participation.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of our board members are farmers, so their availability is very seasonal. So when, depending on what season it is, they'll be more available and have more time to dedicate to the committees or just like board work. But right now, for example, it's like peak season, and they're not really available, or they're not prioritizing board work, which makes sense. So we try to be strategic on who we ask to join what committee, depending on what work that committee does.
So Alexis, you said that there's a lot of staff support of these committees. Does that mean we're on all 6 committees, or is that split up? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Megan used to lead the vendor handbook committee. But since she just left, I'll probably lead it this year while I train Shah, who's our office manager, that kind of absorb a lot of Megan's job, and hopefully she'll take it from there. But yeah, it's a lot of work. What's your board orientation process? So once they've been elected as board members, I'll try to schedule a date that works for all the new board members, and I invite older board members too if they want to come and have a refresher. But I'll invite them to come to the office, and we do an in-person board orientation where I go through the LCFM 101 presentation, and I go through very basic, like, what do we do? What should you do? And rules, like how does the token system, because if it depends on what kind of member. If it's a member that is, a board member that's already a member, they probably are pretty familiar with a lot of our operational stuff. But if it's a community member, they're pretty new to everything. So it's just like, how do the token system work? What kind of programming do we do? That way, when we're talking about, creating financial policies and stuff like that, they understand what we're talking about when there's like $100,000 of EBT out floating around. And so it doesn't feel as scary, and just kind of try to make it make sense before that first board meeting. But it usually takes 2 hours for that board orientation. Do I create board meeting agendas? Yeah, so what I do is that I send the first draft to all of our board members, probably about a week and a half before a board meeting, and they say, this is what I have. If you have any edits or anything you want to add, send it by X date. And sometimes they will, sometimes they don't. And yeah, that's how we come up with an agenda.
Is there other market staff on this call that are also kind of leading the admin of their board meetings and committee meetings? Just curious how common that is, and if you have another take on it, or how you handle doing that. But I also see there's another question in the chat too.
I guess I would say committee work is one that I wish they would take on more. That's a funny question, because I do wish that they would take on more of the committee work, but also sometimes I don't, if there's stuff that needs to like happen. Yes, I don't know how to answer that exactly. I think that once board members feel more educated on everything that, like how everything that needs to happen, and they could maybe take on more, then maybe I would want them to take on more. But sometimes having them take on more creates a little bit more work and more delay on things that need to get done. So yeah, that's a hard one to answer. Board recruitment is something that I wish they would take on more, that they totally could. There's a lot of like, because we're short board members, and they're like, well, Alexis, who are you recruiting? And I've tried my very best, but I do wish that they would like take it more upon themselves to like go out and talk to people, recruit people.
Yeah, a lot of this is making me think of, I've seen some like really nice graphics of the different stages of boards, right? And like often when a nonprofit is starting or when a board is newer or just being formed, you have like a really working board that's really involved in those day-to-day operations. And then as the organization grows, as staff grows, right, you like work towards this governance board model where they're more there for strategic planning and direction and like oversight and not as involved. And I've seen some really great graphics of kind of like, here's what the board's responsibility is versus the staff's responsibility at each of those stages, because there's many stages in between kind of like being a working board to going to a governance board. And I think that in between stage is something that's always really hard for boards, because like you're saying, finding that balance is difficult.
Yeah, no, that's very well put. And we are very much in that transitional place, I think. And unfortunately, we just lost Megan just left the organization. So there's been some reshuffling and like restructuring of the staff as of last month that is having a certain kind of impact on what we have like just decided it's going to be. So it's just an ever-changing process, I guess.
I guess kind of related to that and going back to orientation stuff, how do you all kind of hold that balance in your orientation between like, here's the 101 of what LCFM is and does, and here's what your responsibilities are as a board member? I know at FMF that's something that we've struggled with. Like our orientation used to be really heavy on like, what is our organization and what do we do? And then we were finding that a lot of folks were kind of like newer to boards and just not familiar with what does it mean to be a board member and what do I do with that. So then our orientation shifted really heavily in that direction. And now folks are like, but I don't really understand what you do as an organization. So there's like, yeah, again, another balancing act of.
Yeah. For the orientation, I break it up into, I guess, 3 parts, where first I do LCFM 101, like what does LCFM do? And then I move on to board expectations. And in there, I include committee expectations. And then the third part of the orientation is them asking questions, so I know what to focus on more, just so I can use that time better. So once we got through, like, what does LCFM do and what are the board expectations, then from there, like, what are you still unsure about? What interests you that you want to know more about? Because some folks are more like financially oriented, some folks are more like programming oriented. So depending on who it is, then I'll focus on like a certain area more. hopefully to get them excited to like participate in that area later on. So we currently have 8 board members. We've got 3 community members and 5 member directors. We're supposed to have 9 members, 4 community members, 4 community members, 5 member directors. But we're short of 1 community member. And our bylaws are set up so we are able to operate regardless, but it would be nice to fill the full council. Yeah, the bylaws are always set up so we have to have 1 more member director than community director, always. And that's felt very important to membership.
For your member, how did you call them? Your member members? They like, does the rest of the vendor, like, do they represent all vendors, and are they chosen by vendors, or like how do you define what
Yeah, so all 9 directors represent the full membership, regardless if they're community or member directors. And then the member directors are elected by the membership at the annual member meeting at the beginning of each, well, it's 3-year terms. So, whoever's term is up will do elections for that position. And then the members, we create a ballot for all the candidates that are running, all the member directors that are running. And then the membership votes those directors. And then the board of directors are the ones who elect the community directors. So the membership votes the member directors and gives them authorization to elect the community directors. And elections happen once a year at the beginning of the year. And we haven't, I've been managing for 5 years, and we've always had kind of the exact same amount of people running that we needed. I think only 1 year we had 1 more where they actually had to make a decision. But then very shortly after, someone dropped out. So then that one person that didn't get elected kind of just stepped right into it. So I don't know if for better or for worse, we haven't had very tense elections.
Does your market ever have the thing where vendors who aren't on the board feel like the member directors who are on the board are making decisions that are kind of in favor of what that vendor's own business are, or that there's some bias in that? Or having that voting in an election process seems to make it really clear that like you're representing everyone. I've seen other markets with vendor members on the board, and people are really unclear of like what they're trying to represent and if they're really representing all vendors, and there can get to be kind of disputes of like, well, they're just on that board to keep other farms out or something like that.
Yeah.
Come up much?
It is a pretty delicate subject. I think all of our board members are really good at keeping each other accountable. So sometimes when we're discussing a certain topic and one of the board members is seemingly leading their own agenda, people are really good about being like, well, that's your perspective because of this, but let's keep in mind, every other type of vendor. And they're pretty good about that. I'm pretty good about that. And I feel like that is actually like me being at the board meetings. I'm not a voting director. I'm kind of there just to make sure that they're being very considerate of the full membership and have like a good perspective of the full market and the whole organization. So sometimes I do need to remind them about things, but they're pretty good about it. I haven't, yeah, and anything that's a pretty big change, we do put it out to a membership vote. Yeah. And any change to the bylaws, the membership has to vote, which I think that's like a normal thing all across the board. But yeah, but big decisions, we do tend to put it to a membership vote. Or at least what we do sometimes is that we'll put out a membership survey that will inform then the board's decision if it feels like a big topic. Hopefully the information that is on the Google folder is helpful, and if anyone has any questions following this, you're welcome to email me. This was a lot less scary than I thought it was going to be, so thank you all for asking questions. And
yeah, you did a great job, Alexis. This is a lot of information, and all the materials that are in the folder are super helpful for other markets wanting to do similar things that will save people a lot of work. And yeah, thank you for your time and sharing today. Thank you everybody for coming. Yeah, for more market innovation stories, don't miss the webinar that's coming up next week. It features Amelia Dortch, the consultant that worked with Portland's Come Through market to create a communications plan and strategy that aligned with teaching their market's mission and help them reach the customers they wanted to attract. So we hope that you'll come see that market and hear what they have to share about their experience. Yeah, thanks everybody. So glad you could make it today. And we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
bye.